These past few years we have seen a return of Western movies, both in its more familiar environment and in a more modern setting. We might not enter a new golden age, but we are at least seeing what could be called a new wave for the Western. But what made the old Western disappear, and what has caused this new wave? Let's find out. The Western movies have been around since the birth of cinema, and it's been more than half a century since the golden age of Western reached its peak. During its peak, up to 140 Western movies were produced each year. During the 60s, the decline started to happen. Much of this had to do with an oversaturated market, and the audience started to look elsewhere for entertainment. And a lot of this can be pinpointed to the removal of the Hays Code, which helped a whole new form of movies and genres to take shape.
You talking to me?
In short, the Hays Code is the movie industry's self-censorship guidelines that the majority of movies used between 1934 and 1968. So this applied more or less to all Western movies during the whole golden age of the Western. The code determined what could be portrayed on screen and what couldn't. Traditional values were in focus. All criminal actions had to be punished, and the audience should never be able to feel sympathy for the criminal nor the crime they committed.
Now, who can argue with that?
These forced self-censorship guidelines helped create the mythology of the Western hero. The Lone Ranger who really can't grow roots, who seeks true freedom and who helps those in need. In the Western movies, everything was depicted as either good or evil. There wasn't much room for the grey area in between. But during the 60s, television was introduced more and more to people, which made it harder for cinemas to attract an audience. And, at the same time, foreign movies that weren't bound to the Hays Code started to take root and influence filmmakers in the US. Filmmakers tried to be creative in their ways to go around the Hays Code, and eventually this caused the code to slowly become more and more irrelevant, until it was abandoned and replaced by a new rating system in November 1968. The Western now had a hard time to find its place in this new landscape that the cinema now offered, without trying to reinvent itself.
This is the West, sir. When the legend becomes fact, print the legend.
So what would be the start of this new wave? Sure, there were some good movies that did pop up after the removal of the Hays Code, but nothing that really brought the genre back for real. Clint Eastwood, who took part in changing the Western with the subgenre spaghetti Western, still made some Western movies during the 70s and 80s. And the man who's synonymous with the genre, John Wayne, still made Western movies to the mid-70s. But the first major impact that would show that something new was on the horizon for the genre took place in the early 90s.
I am sending you on a knight's errand.
Dances with Wolves changed the playfield going forward. It took a more epic feel to the genre and put the natives in a better light than the majority of the movies that came before it. The cavalry that we usually see as a good force in the Western movies is now shown as one of the enemies. Neither of these were something that Dances with Wolves was the first Western to portray. Some of the Westerns during the Vietnam era, like Little Big Man, did the same thing. Nonetheless, Dances with Wolves still had a major impact with this type of portrayal. The movie even received an Oscar for Best Picture, which had a huge impact for this genre, because if you want to find another nominee for Best Picture in the same genre, you have to go back to 1969 for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Or, if you want to be picky, 1962 with the movie How the West Was Won. And to find a Western that actually won Best Picture, you have to go back even further to 1931 and the movie Cimarron. That's a 59-year gap between Cimarron's Oscar for Best Picture and Dances with Wolves. After that, you didn't have to wait long, because only 2 years later, Unforgiven won Best Picture in 1993. And since then, there have been a number of Westerns nominated for Best Picture, like The Power of the Dog, The Revenant, and Django Unchained, among others. The new millennium had more Western movies in that category than the whole 20th century had in total. And then they only produced 140 Western movies per decade, compared to the Golden Age, who did that per year. The Western was back, and with great strength and determination as well. Dances with Wolves' epic take on the Western and Unforgiven's anti-hero movie that distanced itself from the old Western hero portrayal really planted the seeds for what was about to come.
Are you addressing me?
Since the early 90s, there has been a steady increase in quality Western movies and TV series. Some go back to the more original Western tale depicted in the Golden Age. Some are even remaking movies from that era, but most of them have spread their wings, taken a different route, and been influenced by more gritty urban tales. The world is no longer divided in good or bad. The grey area is given much more space, which introduces us to more fragile protagonists that have more difficult choices ahead than just chasing down the bad guys.
First time?
This new wave of Western doesn't necessarily take place in the old frontier. It could also take a more modern take, like Yellowstone, or even a futuristic one, like Westworld. In fact, many of the new Western movies have a more modern take to them, but they still use the foundation that the old Western is built from. And if it does take place in its more familiar setting, it's usually not as clean-cut as the old movies were. The frontier is gritty, dangerous, and it's hard to differentiate friend from foe.
Well. Looks like Minnie's haberdashery is about to get cozy for the next few days.
Yes, it does.
HBO's Deadwood really took the whole grittiness to heart and wanted to show something different that we weren't used to. You could almost say that they took the Hays Code and did everything in reverse. People aren't afraid of backstabbing each other. There's no such thing as good or bad, only what's best for the town and the citizens that live in it. But that doesn't mean that all share the same view. Everyone has their own take on what's best for the town and its people. Every person has their own morality.
The world ends when you're dead. Until then, you got more punishment in store.
On the movie front, filmmakers that really care for and love cinema, such as the Coen brothers, Alejandro González Iñárritu, and Quentin Tarantino, have all left their mark and applied their signature moves on the Western genre. Taylor Sheridan has really shown with his and John Linson's quality show Yellowstone and its prequels that the Western is still in demand when it comes to TV series. They have managed to fill the gap that Deadwood left when they ended their series, and shown that it can fit in well among its competitors when applied to a more modern setting.
There ain't no telling what tomorrow's gonna throw at us.
The new wave has moved away from the lonesome rider and adapted more from other genres. The lone cowboy without any background is no more. He now carries the past with him as a badge instead of a tin star. He's vulnerable, but still doesn't shy away, running out guns blazing to reach his goals. The code of the West may have changed, but the struggle and impact have not. Thank you for watching. If you liked what you just saw, please like and subscribe. If I missed anything, please let me know in the comments below. Oh, and one more thing. Tobacco juice.